I died when I was 9. It wasn't for long, just a few minutes according to the paramedics. But it was long enough to feel everything change, long enough to meet God, and long enough for Him to show me why I had to come back. Because what I saw, it wasn't some beautiful prophecy. It was a warning. And the end He showed me is much, much closer than any of us want to believe. Before I get into that, you need to understand who I was. My life was normal. I worked in marketing. I had a small apartment with a cat that was probably plotting my demise. I worried about student loans and what to make for dinner. I was just like anyone else. My biggest problem was my Wi-Fi cutting out in the middle of a movie. I had no idea. But that day changed the entire course of my life. It was a perfect summer afternoon, the kind that feels sticky and slow. The air smelled like chlorine and hot concrete. I remember the blinding sun on the water of the community pool, making it look like a sheet of crushed diamonds. I was just a kid. Church was a place you went on Christmas with your grandparents. God was just a story. My only heaven was that cool, silent blue of the water. I remember doing a cannonball, the explosion of water, the shock of the cold. I pushed off the bottom, swimming underwater, my eyes open. The world above was wavy and distorted. The sounds of kids laughing were muffled and distant. It was peaceful down there. My own little world. But then, something went wrong. A sudden sharp pain shot through my leg. A cramp. It seized me, pulling my leg up tight. I tried to kick, to push myself up to the surface, but my body wouldn't obey. Panic exploded in my chest like a firework. I could see the sun so close, right there, but I couldn't reach it. The burning in my lungs was the first thing to go. It just stopped, and in its place, a strange, terrible calm washed over me. The blue of the water stopped being water. It became everything, the whole universe. And then, just as quickly, the blue became nothing, just a deep, silent darkness. But what happened next was far worse than just dying. What would you do if you were shown the end of the world? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to hear what I saw on the other side, make sure to subscribe and hit that bell so you don't miss the next part of this story. I'll be sharing more experiences like this one very soon. Before I tell you what I saw in that darkness, you have to understand the life I came back to. The life I lived for 30 years with that secret burning a hole in my soul. On paper, it was the life you're supposed to want. I had a corner office, well, a cubicle near the window, at a marketing firm downtown. I made good money, enough for a clean, minimalist apartment that was always featured on my friends' Instagram stories. I had a cat named Loki, who definitely lived up to his name. My world was a cycle of deadlines, lukewarm coffee, and scrolling through other people's perfect lives on my phone before bed. But every night, after the city lights painted soft stripes across my ceiling, a silence would fall. And in that silence, I felt like a ghost in my own life. I'd look at my hands and wonder if they were really mine. Everything felt temporary, flimsy, like a movie set that would be torn down as soon as the director yelled, "Cut." I was playing the part of a successful, happy woman, but I'd forgotten all my lines. The truth is, I was profoundly, bone-deep lonely. But it was a loneliness no one could fix. Because how do you explain to the guy you're on a second date with that you can't take his 5-year plans seriously because you've seen what the world looks like when all the plans stop mattering? How do you tell your best friend, who's crying over a breakup, that her pain is real and valid, but you've felt the sorrow of God Himself? You can't. So you just nod, and you listen, and you keep the secret locked away. It was a wall between me and everyone else. A sheet of glass. I could see them, but I could never really touch them. My relationships were like wading in the shallow end of the pool. I never let anyone go deep. I'd watch couples hold hands on the street, and I'd feel this ache, this impossible longing. It wasn't just for love. It was for connection. The very thing I was shown we were about to lose. I was living proof of the prophecy. I was alive, but I wasn't living. I was the first empty soul, the first hollowed-out heart. That was my secret shame. I tried to bury it. I worked longer hours. I took up hobbies I didn't care about. I traveled to places I saw on the internet. I was running, trying to outrun the memory of that silent, warm light and the terrible, beautiful truth it had shown me, but the vision always caught up. It would flash behind my eyes when I saw a crowd of people all staring at their phones, their faces lit by that pale, artificial glow. I was living in the beginning of the end, and I was the only one who knew it. But pretending became impossible. The silence I was keeping started to get loud. It was a buzzing in my ears that never went away. I knew I had a choice. I could let the secret consume me, let me fade into the background just like everyone in the vision, or I could do what I was sent back to do. I could warn you. And it all started in that place between life and death. Have you ever felt like you were just an actor playing a part in your own life? Tell me about it in the comments. If you want to finally see what God showed me in that void, make sure you subscribe and ring that bell. You're not going to want to miss what comes next. I'll be sharing more stories that prove we're not alone in this. The first sign was small. So small I almost missed it. I was in a Monday morning meeting, the kind where everyone pretends to listen while checking emails under the table. The air was stale with the smell of burnt coffee and quiet desperation. My boss David was clicking through a PowerPoint presentation, his voice a low drone. I remember looking around the long, polished table, and that's when I saw it. For maybe 2 seconds, every single person in that room was looking down at their phone. Not one person was looking at David. Not one person was looking at each other. Their faces were all lit from below by that pale, blue-white light. Blank. Vacant. It was an exact snapshot from my vision. The room felt suddenly cold. The sound of David's voice seemed to come from a million miles away. My heart hammered against my ribs. It was just a moment. Then someone laughed at a joke David made, and the spell was broken. But I had seen it. The disconnect. It wasn't a prophecy about the future. It had already started. But what happened after that was even worse. The signs started coming faster, like aftershocks from an earthquake. I'd be on the subway, and I'd see a mother pushing a stroller with one hand, her eyes glued to her phone with the other, completely ignoring the baby trying to get her attention. I'd see couples at dinner, sitting in a bubble of total silence, each scrolling through their own separate digital world. They were together, but they were utterly alone. It was the vision playing out in high definition, right in front of me. And the buzzing in my ears, the one I'd lived with for years, it got louder. It became a physical pressure whenever I was around these scenes, like the air was too thick to breathe. The real turning point, the moment I knew I couldn't just keep this to myself, happened with my best friend, Sarah. We were having our weekly coffee. She was telling me about a guy she'd started seeing, but her eyes kept flicking down to the phone on the table. Her story was punctuated by the click, click, click of her typing. I could see her face, hear her words, but she wasn't there. She was a ghost at her own table. I reached across and put my hand over hers. "Sarah," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Are you okay?" She blinked, looking up at me as if waking from a dream. Her eyes were unfocused for a second. "Yeah, of course," she said, pulling her hand away to pick up her phone again. "Sorry, just, And she smiled, but it was a hollow thing. It didn't reach her eyes. In that moment, I felt the glass wall between us become a foot of solid concrete. The sorrow I felt then was so profound, so sharp. It was like a piece of what I'd felt in the presence of God. He wasn't just sad for the world. He was sad for us, for moments just like this. That night, I went home and I couldn't escape the feeling. The buzzing was a roar. I felt like I was vibrating, like my own atoms were trying to pull apart. I walked into the bathroom and avoided my own reflection. I was terrified of what I might see. Finally, I forced myself to look in the mirror. My face was pale, my eyes wide with fear. But then, for just a heartbeat, it happened. My reflection changed. My own eyes went slack, vacant. The light behind them just switched off. It was the same empty look I'd seen in the meeting, on the subway, in my best friend. The hollowness wasn't just out there anymore. It was inside me, too. It was trying to claim me. Have you ever looked at someone you love and felt like they were a complete stranger? Tell me your story in the comments. And if you want to know what I did after seeing that thing in the mirror, You need to subscribe and hit that notification bell. The fight for my own soul was just beginning, and I'll be sharing more of these warnings very soon. That thing in the mirror, it broke me. Seeing my own eyes, empty and dead, was the final push. The wall I'd built around that memory crumbled to dust. And for the first time in 30 years, I let myself fall back into the water. I let myself remember the day the blue took me. It was the last week of summer vacation. The air was thick and sweet, smelling of freshly cut grass and chlorine. The sun was a giant, angry spotlight in the sky, making the concrete around the community pool hot enough to burn your feet. I remember the sounds more than anything. The shriek of kids playing, the splash of a dive, the lifeguard's whistle cutting through it all. I was 9 years old. My biggest worry in the world was getting a brain freeze from my slushie. Life was simple. It was bright. I ran to the edge of the deep end, my little legs pumping. I was going to do the biggest cannonball ever. I remember the feeling of launching myself into the air. For one perfect second, I was flying. Then the cold hit me like a slap. A wonderful, shocking cold that chased away the summer heat. I opened my eyes underwater. Everything was blue and silent. The loud, chaotic world above was gone, replaced by a wavy, peaceful dream. The sunlight danced on the surface, looking like a shattered mirror. It was my secret kingdom down there. I pushed off the bottom, starting to swim towards the light. And that's when it happened. A pain, sharp and electric, shot through my calf. It felt like a fist was clenching the muscle from the inside, twisting it into a knot. A cramp. It pulled my leg up, useless. I tried to kick with my other leg, to pull myself up with my arms, but panic had taken over. It was a cold, black poison flooding my chest. I could see the surface. It was right there, inches away. I could see the distorted shapes of people walking around the edge of the pool, but my body was an anchor, pulling me down into the silent blue. My lungs were on fire, an absolute tearing agony. I thought about my mom, how she told me to come home when the streetlights came on. I wondered if she'd be mad that I was late. That was my last thought. Not about life or death, but just not wanting to get in trouble. The last bubble of air escaped my lips. I watched it wobble its way to the surface, a tiny ghost leaving me behind. And then, the burning just stopped. The pain vanished. The panic dissolved. A strange and terrible calm washed over me. It felt like falling into a warm bed after a long, long day. The blue of the water stopped being water. It expanded, becoming the sky, the universe, everything. My body didn't feel like my body anymore. It was just a heavy coat I was shrugging off. The light from the sun faded, not like a switch being flipped, but like a slow, gentle sunset. And then, there was nothing. Just a deep, quiet, and complete darkness. But I wasn't alone in it. Not for a second. Have you ever had a moment where you felt you were on the brink of something else? Share your experience in the comments. To hear who was waiting for me in that darkness, and to understand the warning he gave me, you have to subscribe and hit that bell. The most important part of my story is coming next. I wasn't gone. I was just somewhere else. The darkness wasn't empty or cold. It was quiet, peaceful. It was like finally taking off a heavy, wet coat you didn't even know you were wearing. My body, that little 9-year-old girl sinking to the bottom of the pool, she wasn't me anymore. She was just a thing I had been using. I was free of it. I had no weight, no lungs that screamed for air, no skin that could feel the sting of chlorine. I was just me. A point of pure awareness, floating in a silent, endless, and surprisingly gentle black. The strangest part was the senses. I had no eyes, but I could perceive the infinite space around me. I had no ears, but I could hear the silence. It was a sound all its own, a deep, low hum, like the universe breathing in its sleep. I tried to find my hands, to feel my own face, but there was nothing to find. I was just a thought, a memory. It was disorienting, like waking up in a room with no walls, no floor, and no ceiling. And for a moment, I wondered if this was it, just floating in the quiet dark forever. But then, a light began to grow. It didn't come from a specific place. It came from everywhere at once. It was a warmth that started inside me and spread out, filling the entire void. It was the color of honey and the feeling of your mother's hand on your forehead when you have a fever. It was a light you didn't see, you felt. And in the center of that warmth, there was a presence. It was so huge and ancient that it felt like it was made of stars, but it was so gentle and close that it felt like it knew my name. A voice spoke, but it didn't use sound. The words simply appeared inside me, fully formed, as if I'd known them my whole life. Little one, you're not supposed to be here yet. The voice wasn't male or female, it was both. It was the sound of 1,000 loving parents, all speaking at once, with an understanding so complete it made the soul I didn't know I had ache with relief. All the fear I felt in the water, the panic, the burning in my lungs, it was all gone, burned away by that light. How can you be afraid of something that feels more like home than your own bedroom? I just felt known, completely and totally seen. But then I felt something else, something that came from the very heart of that light. It was a sadness, a deep, ocean-sized sorrow. And I understood, without being told, that it wasn't for me. It was the grief of a father watching his children willingly walk away from him, and from each other. Have you ever felt a presence you couldn't explain, or a moment of peace that seemed to come from nowhere? Share your story in the comments below. And if you want to see the vision he showed me, the warning I was sent back to deliver, make sure you subscribe and hit that bell. What comes next is the reason I'm telling you all this. And in the middle of that vast fatherly sorrow, the voice came again, not with words, but with a feeling of pure, urgent intent. I need you to see. I need you to remember why I am grieving. The warmth didn't vanish. Instead, the universe around me dissolved, like a painting washed away by rain, and I was thrust into the vision. It wasn't a movie I was watching. I was in it. I was standing on a street corner in a city so vast it stole my breath. The buildings were titans of glass and steel, scraping a sky the color of sick, rust-colored water. But the silence, that was the first thing that truly terrified me. A city of millions, and there was no sound. No cars, no talking, no life. It was a graveyard with skyscrapers for tombstones. Then I saw them. The people. They were everywhere, walking in streams down the sidewalks, but none of them were looking up. Every single person was staring down into the palm of their hand, at a pale, flickering light I couldn't quite see. Their faces were slack. Their eyes were blank, completely vacant. They'd bump into each other, a soft collision of bodies, and not even notice. No apology, no glance of recognition. They were just obstacles to one another. I saw a family sitting around a beautiful dinner table in one of the glass towers. A father, a mother, 2 children. But they weren't speaking. The only sound was the scrape of forks on plates. Their eyes were 1,000,000 miles away, lost in that same pale glow from their own devices. They were together, but they were more alone than anyone I had ever seen. This was the first great revelation he gave me. The end of the world wasn't fire and brimstone. It was a quiet fade to gray. He didn't show me a war, or a plague, or an asteroid hurtling through space. He showed me something so much worse, because it was something we would choose for ourselves. The voice echoed through my soul, heavy with the weight of that choice. This is the true end. Not a destruction from the outside. It is a collapse from within. The final choice to disconnect from each other, and from me. He showed me a world where everyone was alive, but absolutely no one was living. A planet of hollowed-out hearts, where empathy was a forgotten language, and love was just a word people used to read about. But what he showed me next was the thing that truly broke my heart. The vision shifted again. I saw a woman in her 30s, sitting alone in a clean, minimalist apartment, the city lights painting stripes on her face. She was scrolling through a phone, a sad, empty smile on her lips as she looked at pictures of other people's lives. Her cat was asleep on the couch. Her takeout was getting cold on the coffee table. And I realized with a jolt of absolute horror, I was looking at myself. He was showing me my own future. That was the second revelation. This wasn't just a warning for humanity. It was a warning for me. I was on the exact same path. The presence gave me a choice then. It was a boundary, a line drawn in the fabric of eternity. I could feel the peace of that warm, honey-colored light behind me, calling me to stay, to let go of the world, of the pain, of the lonely woman I was going to become. Or I could go back. The voice was softer now, filled with a desperate hope. This is not a sentence. It is a warning. Go back. Not just to tell them. Go back and learn to live. To truly connect. Be the one who looks up. And that was the final, most shocking revelation of all. My mission wasn't just to be a messenger. It was to be the message. I had to go back and fight for my own soul. To prove that the hollowed-out world he showed me wasn't inevitable. I chose to go back. The instant I made the choice, it felt like being thrown off a cliff. The peace was ripped away, and I was slammed back into my own body with the force of a car crash. The first thing I felt was pain. A searing, agonizing fire in my lungs as they took their first breath of air. The silence was shattered by chaotic shouting, my mother screaming my name, the distant wail of a siren. The weight of my own little body was crushing. The cold concrete under my back was an agony. Coming back hurt so much more than dying ever did, because I was coming back with a mission. I was coming back with the sorrow of God burning in my 9-year-old heart. What would you have chosen? To stay in that peace, or to come back to a world on the brink of falling apart? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want to hear how I spent the next 30 years trying to run from this mission, and the one event that forced me to finally speak out, make sure you subscribe and hit that bell. You need to hear what happened next. In the heart of that vision, with the image of my own lonely future still burning behind my eyes, he laid the choice before me. It wasn't a question spoken in words. It was a feeling, a crossroads presented to my soul. Behind me was the light, that warm, honey-colored peace that felt more like home than any place I'd ever known. It was an offer to let go, to stay there, free from the weight of a body, free from the pain of the world, free from the future of that sad woman in the apartment, to simply be. And ahead of me was the pool, my small 9-year-old body sinking in the blue, the chaos, the fear, the cold. Ahead of me were 30 years of loneliness, of carrying a secret that would feel like a stone in my gut. Ahead of me was the world he had shown me, a world sliding silently into a gray, hollowed-out existence. The choice was simple, infinite, loving peace, or a single, painful, and vital mission. The voice, that feeling that was God, washed over me one last time. It was no longer filled with sorrow, but with a desperate, pleading hope. This is not a sentence. It is a warning. Go back. Not just to tell them. Go back and learn to live. To truly connect. Be the one who looks up. And that was the final, most staggering revelation of all. My mission wasn't just to be a messenger shouting a warning from a mountaintop. It was to be the message itself. I had to go back and fight for my own soul, to prove that the hollowed-out world he showed me wasn't a guarantee. It was just a possibility. I chose to go back. The moment I made the choice, it was like being thrown off the edge of the universe. The peace was ripped away from me like a warm blanket on a freezing night. The gentle darkness shattered, and I was falling, tumbling back through a tunnel of violent light and sound. It was an agony beyond description. I felt myself being squeezed, compressed, forced back into a container that was suddenly too small, too heavy, too physical. I slammed back into my body with the force of a head-on collision. The first thing I felt was pain. A searing, all-consuming fire in my lungs as they spasmed and sucked in their first gulp of air. It wasn't air. It was a liquid fire that burned all the way down. The divine silence was replaced by a deafening chaos. My mother was screaming my name, her voice raw and torn. There were other shouts. The distant, rising wail of a siren. The cold of the concrete under my back was a shock, a brutal agony against my skin. The weight of my own limbs was crushing me. Coming back to life hurt so much more than dying ever did. Because I wasn't just coming back to my body. I was coming back with the sorrow of God burning inside my 9-year-old heart. What would you have chosen? To stay in that perfect peace, or to come back to a world on the brink of falling apart? Let me know your honest answer in the comments below. And if you want to hear how I spent the next 30 years trying to run from this mission, and the one event that finally forced me to speak out, make sure you subscribe and hit that bell. You need to hear what happened next. The first thing I remember after the chaos at the poolside was the smell. It was a sharp, clean, chemical smell that stung my nose. Antiseptic. The sound of my mother crying had been replaced by the steady, rhythmic beep of a machine next to my head. I opened my eyes, and the world was a blurry, painful white. The ceiling, the sheets, the nurse's uniform, it was all a sterile, washed-out version of the warm, honey-colored light I had just left. That machine was counting my heartbeats, proof that I was alive. But its rhythm felt all wrong. It was a frantic mechanical noise compared to the slow, deep, silent hum of the universe I'd just heard. My parents were there. My mom's face was puffy and red, her eyes holding a kind of desperate relief that was painful to look at. My dad was trying to be strong, but his smile was brittle, like a piece of glass about to shatter. He kept stroking my hair, saying my name over and over. "You're okay, sweetie. You're back. You're okay." They were looking at their little girl who had almost been taken from them. But I wasn't that little girl anymore. I looked at these two people I loved more than anything, and I felt like I was watching them through a thick window. They were celebrating my return, but the person they were celebrating was already gone. How could I tell them that? A doctor came in, a kind man with tired eyes. He explained to my parents, and to me, what had happened. He used big words like hypoxia and transient cardiac arrest. He said it was common for people in near-death situations to experience hallucinations, seeing lights, feeling peace. He called it a trick of a brain starved for oxygen. I just sat there, a 9-year-old girl in a cartoon print hospital gown, and nodded. I didn't argue. I didn't say that the hallucination felt more real than his own voice. That was the first time I learned the terrible weight of my secret. The truth was mine, and mine alone. To everyone else, I was just a lucky kid. To myself, I was a ghost. But what happened next was even worse. The world I came back to felt wrong. The colors were duller. The food tasted like cardboard. The sound of the television in the corner of my room was a meaningless, irritating noise. It was like I had spent my whole life seeing the world in black and white, and for a few minutes, someone had shown me glorious, impossible color. And then they'd snatched it away again. Now the black and white was unbearable. I could feel the hollowness of things. I could see the tiny, invisible cracks in people's smiles. The day I was supposed to go home, my favorite aunt brought me a gift. It was a beautiful porcelain doll with bright, glassy eyes. Everyone in the room smiled, waiting for me to squeal with delight like I normally would. I took the doll. I looked at its perfect, vacant face, and then I looked at my aunt, who was already glancing at her watch, and I saw it, that flicker, that momentary disconnect he had shown me. The vision wasn't just a memory anymore. It was a new pair of eyes I could never take off. I became a quiet child after that. The chattering, happy-go-lucky girl who loved the pool was replaced by someone who preferred to sit by the window and watch the world go by. My parents called it trauma. The doctors said it was a normal post-accident response, but I knew the truth. I was listening. I was watching. I was carrying the sorrow of God in my chest, and it was so heavy, it left no room for words. I was alive, yes, but I was no longer a part of the world. I was its silent, lonely witness. How do you go back to being a kid when you've already been shown the end? Tell me what you think in the comments. If you want to understand how this secret shaped my entire life, and the moment I finally broke my silence, you have to subscribe and hit that bell. The story of my mission was just beginning. For 30 years after that day in the hospital, I lived my life as a ghost. I was a silent witness. I went through the motions, high school, college, getting that marketing job. I built a life that looked perfect on the outside, a fortress of success and clean, minimalist furniture. It was all a defense mechanism. I was so terrified of anyone seeing the profound emptiness inside me that I made the outside flawless. I was living the first half of the prophecy he'd shown me. I had become the lonely woman in the glass tower, scrolling through other people's lives, and I hadn't even realized it. That night, after seeing my own eyes go blank in the mirror, I didn't sleep. I just sat on the floor of my living room, the city lights painting slow stripes across the walls, and I let the silence in. For the first time, I didn't fight it. The buzzing in my ears was gone, replaced by a quiet so deep it felt like the void had come back for me. And in that crushing silence, the truth finally hit me with the force of a physical blow. I had been given a choice when I was 9 years old, and for 3 decades, I had been choosing wrong. Every single day. I was choosing the slow fade to gray. I was helping the vision come true. The next morning, as the first hint of dawn touched the sky, I did something I hadn't done in years. I didn't reach for my phone. I walked to my window, slid it open, and just watched the sunrise. The real one. The air was cool on my face, and I could smell the faint scent of rain from the night before. The colors that bled across the horizon, a soft pink, then a fiery orange, then a deep, impossible purple. They felt real. It was the first time since I was a child that a color felt as vibrant as that warm, honey-colored light I remembered. And in that moment, I knew. The running was over. The mission wasn't to warn the world. It was to save myself first. And maybe, just maybe, that would be the only warning that mattered. This was the first true revelation I'd had since coming back. My purpose wasn't to be a prophet. It was to be a participant. I walked into my office that day, right past my cubicle with the window view, and went straight to David's door. I quit. I told him I was leaving to pursue a personal project. He gave me that hollow smile I knew so well and wished me luck, his eyes already flicking down to an alert on his phone. It was the easiest, most meaningless goodbye I'd ever had. I went home, packed one small bag with clothes and a notebook, and left the keys to my perfect apartment on the cold granite countertop. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I had to get away from the silence and the screens. My new purpose wasn't some grand plan written in the stars. It was small. It was radical. It was choosing in every single moment to look up. It meant leaving my phone in my bag when I stood in line for coffee. It meant making eye contact with the cashier and asking about her day, and then actually listening to the answer instead of planning my next move. It meant sitting on a park bench and watching kids chase pigeons, feeling the warmth of the actual sun on my skin, and realizing this was the heaven I had forgotten. These tiny acts of connection felt like rebellions. Each one was a spark of light, a single vote against the world he had shown me. Each one was a breath of real air after a lifetime of drowning. And that's what led me here, to this camera. To you. After months of learning how to reconnect with the world, I realized the final terrifying step. The secret I had carried for so long was a wall, designed to keep everyone out. But a story is a bridge. My new mission isn't to preach from a mountaintop. It's to sit down with you, right here, and share. To tell you what I saw, and what I'm still learning every day. To be the one person who looks you in the eye, even through a screen, and asks, I see you. Are you still there? Are you looking up? Because the fight against the silence isn't fought with armies. It's fought with conversations. Have you ever had to completely tear down your life to find your real purpose? Tell me your story in the comments below. And if you want to know what happened when I tried to use this new purpose to reconnect with the people from my old life, like my best friend Sarah, you'll need to subscribe and hit that bell. Because trying to pull someone else out of the silence, that's a whole different battle. So that's the story. The day the blue took me, and the 30 years I spent running from the truth it showed me. I used to think the vision was a curse, a terrible burden that made a normal life impossible. But I was wrong. It wasn't a curse. It was a map. It was a map showing a road we were all walking down, and he was just begging one of us to stop, turn around, and tell the others where it leads. He didn't show me the end of the world. He showed me a world that had lost its soul. And the scariest part wasn't the vision of empty cities or silent families. The scariest part is that it wasn't a prophecy about some distant future. It was a diagnosis of right now. The sickness is already here. It's in the silence that falls at the dinner table when the phones come out. It's in the text you send to the person sitting in the same room. It's in the endless scroll that numbs you just enough to get through another lonely evening. We're choosing it. Every day, in a million tiny ways, we are choosing the slow fade to gray. I was sent back not to be a prophet, but to be a reminder. A reminder that the most sacred, most divine thing we can ever do is to look at another human being and truly see them. To listen to them without planning what you're going to say next. To put down the noise and the distractions and just be present. That's the heaven we've forgotten how to find. It isn't in some distant, honey-colored light. It's right here. It's in the eyes of the people we love. My mission isn't to save the world. I can't. My mission is to save my own soul, one real conversation at a time. And maybe, just maybe, that's how we all start. This, me talking to you right now, sharing the deepest, most guarded part of myself, this is my attempt. This is me looking up from my own screen. This is me trying to build a bridge out of the silence. Because I have to believe that the opposite of that hollowed-out world isn't noise or chaos. It's connection. The choice he gave me in that warm, quiet place wasn't a one-time thing. It's a choice we all make, 100 times a day. Do we choose the easy, comfortable numbness, or the messy, complicated, beautiful work of reaching out to each other? What choice will you make the next time the silence falls? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story meant something to you, please subscribe and hit the bell. I'll be sharing more stories about the moments that wake us up, and I'd be honored if you'd join me.